In my last video, we talked about mount, and from mount, transitioning to S-mount when we're losing the position. Now I wanna take a deeper dive into S-mount because I don't see a lot of white belts utilizing this positioning. And once you do, it can change your overall game. So if that sounds like you and you're not using S-mount just yet, you're gonna like this video. Let's dive in. First off, how do we even get to S-mount? Well, normally this comes from a top player in mount, transitioning to S-mount to maintain the position. What happens is a lot of times, white belts will hold on to the mount and they get rolled because they commit overly to maintaining this position. If you're losing the mount, you need to transition to something else, which plays off a concept that you're gonna see all over the place in jiu-jitsu, and that's not forcing it. Sometimes we can't force our opponent to stay in mounts, right? Sometimes they're going to affect escapes, and if we overly commit to that position, we will lose the position. So S-mount is a great place to go to transition to when you're losing the mount. As you see here in this example, it doesn't necessarily matter which way he rolls. I want to transition so that we're both facing in the same direction. So if he rolls to his right, which would be my left, I'm then opening up with my left leg, going heel down into the ground and tucking my left heel into his stomach. From there, my right leg is pinned against his back. Now, what I like to do is I like to drop my chest on top of his upper tricep, the tricep that's closest to me. Again, I'm not forcing myself onto him. I'm not forcing the position. I'm letting my body weight do the work of my muscles. So I'm setting my weight down onto his tricep, and this effectively gives me a nice position to start working other things. This is called S-mount. And I just want to take a quick break to give my sponsors, X Martial, a shout out. Not only does X Martial have the highest quality no-gi gear for adults and kids on the market, they also provide workout equipment and training tools, everything from resistance bands to grip work to abdominal work. You name it, they got it. On top of all that, they also have the X Martial Charity Initiative, where they help bullied or underprivileged people get help with their training fees and free gear. You're not gonna find a higher quality company out there. So if you wanna look as good as me and probably even better, get over to xmartial.com, use my code IRONWILL to save yourself some money, and look good while you sharpen your skills. All right, well, I think that covers it. Let's get back to the video. Now, once we're in S-mount, what do we want to do with it? What can we do with it? Well, one of my most favorite things to go for is the gift wrap. Before I can get the gift wrap, I need to utilize twisting arm control. So as you can see here in this example, I've got my weight collapsed through my chest on top of his tricep. I reach my hand that's behind his back, underneath his neck, and I start hunting for his top arm wrist. If I'm having trouble reaching the wrist, what I can do is take my other arm, put my hand on his elbow that's closest to me, put pressure on that elbow, driving his hand closer to mine, which helps me get that grip on his wrist. Now, a couple points to pay attention to here. I'm not trying to twist him in half. I'm not using a lot of strength or energy in this position. I am obtaining a strong grip on his wrist, and then I'm letting my weight collapse on his tricep, holding it in position. This actually can be a great resting place if you need it. You can control your opponent quite well from here without using up a ton of energy if you're doing it correctly. For the guy on bottom, he probably will be squirming, he probably will be fighting. The point is he'll be using his energy to try to get out. And it's gonna be a very difficult position to unravel, which makes it a great place for you to rest and kind of catch your breath for a second. Now, I'm never gonna recommend that you stay here and stall and ride this one out if it's a jiu-jitsu scenario, right? If it's a self-defense scenario, sure, you can wait there all day till help arrives. But in jiu-jitsu, in a tournament setting, I'm not gonna recommend that you stall here. Take a couple seconds to collect yourself, and then you're going to evolve the position. Well, where can we go from twisting arm control? We can go for the gift wrap. So my other hand that isn't holding his wrist is going to fight under his elbow and reach through that gap to get to my own wrist. Sometimes this position can be a little bit tight and it can be difficult to get your hand to your own wrist. What I like to do then is pull that hand that I have the wrist control with nice and tight. It gets really uncomfortable, and then I will relax that tightness, which will open up a gap between our arms and his chest. In that window of opportunity where I relax the tightness of the twisting arm control, and it is a small window, that's when I fight my opposite hand through to my own wrist. Now, if twisting arm control is secure, the gift wrap is even more secure. This is a great position to be, especially because you have access to the back. back. While still utilizing our S mount with our legs, I'm using my front heel to pinch in on his stomach, and I'm using my back leg to pinch in on his back. In tucking that rear leg against my opponent's back, it allows me to pick his body weight up and sit back into the back take. Now, once you get to the back, as you can see in this example, I'm tucking my head between his head and the floor. If I don't do this, it's going to be much easier for him to get his back flat to the mat and escape. If you want to retain this position as best as possible, make sure you keep yourself or your head between your opponent and the floor. Now, once we're here, it puts us in a great position to hit a pretty cool one-arm choke. I take my left hand and collapse that over his left wrist. From here, I'm applying downward pressure to keep his left arm away from his neck. Simultaneously, as I apply downward pressure through my left hand, my right hand is sliding across his chest and grabbing for his shoulder. Now, I really like the shoulder as a pit stop because it helps me get the depth of the one-arm choke that I really need. Sometimes if I go straight for the choke from this position without going to the shoulder, the depth isn't correct and I end up having a difficult time finishing it. By reaching all the way to the shoulder, it puts your elbow in a nice position in front of his neck. Now from here, you can either shrug up on his shoulder, making him say, I don't know. But if you are in deep enough, all you have to do is slide that hand from the shoulder over his trap as close to the neck as possible. From here, I'm going to get a nice tight grip behind his back by putting my fingers into the meat of his muscle. At the same time, using my head or my face, depending on where I'm at with my positioning, to apply forward pressure through the back of his head. As I'm applying that forward pressure through the back of his head with my own face or head, I'm also taking the V of my elbow and pushing that into his neck, while simultaneously trying to climb my hand further down his back. If you apply all of these movements together, you're gonna get a nice tight choke out of this. And my favorite thing about this is he only has his right arm to defend with, and the right arm isn't the preferred arm to pull down on that choking hand. If he could get his left hand free, that would give him more leverage, more space to escape. But because it's trapped, well, he's trapped. Guys, you don't have to overcomplicate this one. I know it looks like it might be fancy because it's a one-arm choke, but as long as you get the fundamentals down, it's truly not that difficult to get. And if you have the positioning right, it's there for the taking. Obviously, if this is your first time trying this, don't get frustrated. It'll probably be difficult. You'll probably mess it up a few times. Don't expect perfection off your first or second or even your 10th rep. Get your reps in, make your mistakes, give yourself room for grace, and keep it moving. Now I want to rewind back to S-mount just for a second because there is a pretty cool submission from this position that you can hit without ever having to take the back. I've seen this one called many different things, but essentially what it is a variation of a punch choke. We're gonna start by utilizing that twisting arm control, but instead of going for the gift wrap, we're gonna go for the punch choke. Now the setup is very, very similar. As you can see in this example, I have transitioned to S-mount. I'm trapping his tricep with my chest, utilizing that twisting arm control to maintain control of my opponent. Now, as we talked about in the gift wrap, applying strong tension to that twisting mechanic, and then releasing it just for a second, giving us a gap to get our left hand through to the gift wrap. We're gonna do all those movements exactly the same, except we're gonna take our left hand and make a fist, and we're gonna put our pinky knuckle into the side of his neck. Now, taking my neck, for example, if you look here, there's a muscle that runs along the side that's called the sternocleidomastoid. This muscle covers our carotid arteries. So what we're doing is basically putting our pinky knuckle right here in the center. There's a sweet spot. If you apply it too far forward, it's gonna slip off. And if you apply it too far back, there's not gonna be much there. It's gonna be really hard to finish. So it will take some trial and error, get that pinky knuckle right in the center, right in that sweet spot. But once you get it right, all you're doing is applying downward pressure through your knuckle into their neck while pulling their trapped hand through very tightly. Doing both of these movements together creates a lot of twisting power and pressure in the neck, which not only hurts, but counts as a choke because you're closing off one carotid with your fist and the other side, the other carotid's being closed off with his shoulder. Now you want to be careful with this one because it can be considered a jerk move. So, I mean, if you're at your home school and you want to learn it on your buddies, I say go for it. If you're in a tournament, full send this thing. But if you're visiting other schools, cross training, or you're training with someone who's brand new, I wouldn't full send it because it is a little bit mean. Having good gym etiquette will take you a long way, especially with your reputation among all your training partners. If you break all your toys, you're not gonna have anything to play with, right? So you don't have to full send this one unless you're defending yourself or you're in a tournament. I always like to preface these movements by saying that this isn't the only way to do this. There's a ton of different options from S-mount, twisting arm control, the gift wrap. My way isn't the only way. It's not the best way. It's just what I found to work for me. and hopefully it can work for you. If you guys have other methods, other techniques, other submissions that you like doing from these positions, drop them in the comments because I always read through those, and you'd be surprised how many people you can help with your knowledge in the comments. So, you know how we like to end them, sometimes backwards, always forwards. I'll see you in the next one.